Okay, so this is a little short clip from inside the greenhouse. On the inside we've got a plastic greenhouse covering which has got a like a shade cloth built into it, and then for the airflow there's windows like that's got inset screen over it. It's very fine, probably about 2 mil, 1.5 to 2 mil mesh over the windows, so that's open. There's another window there with the, you can close these down so that you have less airflow or more airflow. You can see by the movement, you can see things moving in here. There's a lot of airflow at the moment because it's quite windy. I found the most airflow the better. That you can't go wrong with more airflow. You can just see that back wall there just moving in and out, but it's all just natural airflow from outside. And got a few clusters that have come up on these buckets. It's probably about 300 grams or so on here. That's quite a big cluster. Mushrooms, I've left them go a bit long. I've just been so busy with work. I haven't had time to really spend the time manicuring and looking after the mushrooms. Like, they take a lot of work, don't get me wrong, they're very labour intensive. I mean, some more clusters there, nice white clusters. Some more up there. Those ones are a bit better if you can pick them a bit earlier like that, when they're still nice and round on the edges. When they get a bit wrinkly on the edges like that, they're sort of getting towards the end of their life. But when they're nice and round like that, they're good, really good. But some of them didn't make it, like those ones there. Those ones dried up, they didn't amount to anything. But I haven't been misting these at all. I haven't touched them for about a week. This is about the sixth flush. The sixth flush that I've got on these buckets, and all I do is I just keep the holes of the buckets really clean. Like when the mushrooms come out, I trim all the old stalk out really well, make sure that there's more clusters around the back here too, look. Make sure that all the old stalks cleaned off, and then that cuts down the risk of contamination from mold. So I don't really have a mold problem in here at all. Like, the floor is painted and I just hose it out, and whenever I keep it quite clean, so like I keep the buckets clean, everything's clean. So I don't have a mold problem. Just scrub the floor out, and we got the doorway, which is just wide open, but it's covered with mesh. It's covered with mesh, and some of that frost cloth there, just to, like, the frost cloth's really good because bugs can't get through it because it's really fine gauze. So yeah, there's not a mold problem that I have to deal with. Like, if you're doing your buckets with fresh straw and cycling through your straw, like this is the sixth flush, so the longer you leave it, the higher the risk of mold problems. But if you're cycling through your straw really quickly, say doing 2 flushes and then changing to new straw, you shouldn't have a mold problem at all. Like, I've had no contamination on these buckets at all, and I've just been using like a real basic as steamer on a gas burner, 200 litre drum, and 90 minutes, steam for 90 minutes, and then pack straight into the bucket system and spawn it up. One thing I would say is that if you can go to sawdust spawn would be better, because the grain spawn tends to ferment a little bit and it attracts fruit flies from the fermenting grain. So that, and even that hasn't even been much of a problem at all, really. So all in all, it's a pretty easy grow, considering some of the complicated systems I have seen. Apart from it being so time consuming, you know, I've got no problems with it. Maybe if I had no job, I'd do this full time and I'd be able to make some money doing it, but trying to do it part time is just not really. It's alright for personal use, and you know, you can supply a few people, but if you want to really make some money on it, you need to be working it full time, because it is a time consuming process. But I'll just have a look on the outside, and this is the outside. It's got a double layer of 70% shade cloth over it, and as you can see, there's a lot of Pahurikawa foliage dropped on the top, so that protects the mushrooms inside and keeps them all clean, because of the plastic doesn't let the dust through. There's like trees right up here, so yeah, I've built it up off the ground too, which helps. So it's built up off the ground a little bit, so you're up away, and the buckets inside keep them off the ground. So like the bottom bucket's actually got nothing in it, so then the buckets go up from there, because the bottom bucket's just like acts as like a space to have a sterile environment before the straw starts. So like if there's any bugs crawling on the ground, it doesn't attract them straight into the straw. They've got to climb up the bucket, and it makes it harder for them, so they don't tend to go in there so much. But yeah, it's just all zipped up, doors open, let air through, natural airflow. One thing I will make eventually is a evaporative cooler, and solar powered evaporative cooling system, and when I get time to do that, I'll post that up and show you all about that. But yeah, this is the greenhouse there. It's 4 meters long by 2 meters wide, and I did a rough estimate. I think if I got the whole thing loaded out, I'd be able to produce about 20 kilos of mushrooms in one flush. But yeah, lots of work, good fun, but if you've got to work full time, it's challenging. Yeah, so that's about it for today. Thanks, and happy mushrooming.